Are you a thoughtful leader? Maybe you are. Maybe you think you are. Let's find out. I'm Mindy Gibbins-Klein. I'm author of The Thoughtful Leader and host of the Thoughtful Leader podcast. Thoughtful leadership is all about thought leadership that goes above and beyond. Thought leadership that is truly new and original, exciting, disruptive, maybe even groundbreaking. Because let's face it, we need to raise the bar. My guests and I are absolutely obsessed with finding truly original thought leadership, and I'm going to bring you so many exciting ideas and opportunities, things for you to think about, and chances for you to push your thinking that you'll be very glad you tuned in. So thanks so much for checking out Thoughtful Leadership and the Thoughtful Leader podcast. I look forward to connecting with you very, very soon. Welcome to the show. My guest today is the amazing thoughtful leader, Sheila Lord. Now, we spoke about her expertise, and you're going to get a very good understanding of this as we go through. But Sheila, welcome to the show.
Hi, Mindy. Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
My pleasure. So tell everybody what you're up to in the world, because you can put it much better than I can. I was very impressed with your credentials, but how would you describe it?
Yeah, so basically I run my own business, BMR Health and Wellbeing, and I started the business 3 years ago. And my absolute passion is to help employers to create better work experiences for employees. Is essentially what we do. That gets translated into a lot of different terminologies, a lot of different language, well-being, mental health at work, workplace well-being. But essentially, it's about creating an experience that is enjoyable for an employee in the day of work.
An experience. Now, that is an intriguing word. Tell us a little bit more about how you go about the business, because, this is all really important, very topical, very current, mental health, well-being. And I think a few years ago, maybe employers weren't as aware of it, but now they're aware they need to do it, but they don't always know what the options are. So what do you do?
I think, again, we talk about this employee experience and, now it's very topical. And I think, do you know what? It's always been topical. And we've always done this with good leaders in good businesses. And I look back, we talk about well-being being topical, but well-being wasn't talked about as a topic. We just worked in good workplaces or we worked in bad workplaces. If it was a bad workplace, we tended to leave. If it was a good workplace, we tended to stay. We didn't overcomplicate it. We overcomplicate it now far too much. It's about bringing it back to basics, about being a good leader, about modelling behaviours you want to see in organisations throughout your people, and creating a work experience. Bring it back to this experience where work is good. I've worked for bosses and I've had leaders that were tough, that set high standards, but that inspired and that motivated and that mentored and that drove you, but in a way that was positive, so that every day when I came into work, I wanted to do the best job I could for that person because I valued the experience that I was having, I valued the learning that I was getting, I valued the development, the recognition that I was getting in that environment. Fast forward, change job, go into a different environment. The business dynamics, the business objectives can still be the very same. But if the leader is not engaging, if the leader doesn't value their people, that experience and the output and what you contribute on your day-to-day role can be completely different. You've not changed as a person, but the way you react to the environment around you has changed, and that will affect performance and productivity.
So I totally hear what you're saying. And in the Thoughtful Leader, we talk about and focus on personal responsibility. I appreciate sometimes people are in an environment that it doesn't make them feel great. And, the reality of it is sometimes we're going to be in those situations or those environments, and we still need to perform at our best. So I'm going to push back just a tiny bit on what you said, because I think it'll be interesting for the listeners and viewers to hear what you think about somebody who's in that they say toxic environment. It doesn't have to be that extreme. It can just be, a bit demotivating. But it's, the leader's not going to change, let's say. So let's continue, if you don't mind, talking about the individual thoughtful leaders, as in the team, employees, and how they can handle that if they're in that situation.
There are ways that we can do that, and let's say we've got an environment, it's not toxic, as you say, but there's maybe some challenges in there. And I think this comes down to, again, having good managers, good structures, good relationships in place, because in an environment, if, things can be difficult, things can be challenging, but things could be, adaptable. There are ways to change that and to make that work well. It's not about employers having to fix things all the time. It's also about employees having a voice, speaking up and saying, well, actually, if we did this way, productivity could be better. If we did that way, these relationships could be better. But what we need to be able to do is to create an environment where people have the confidence to be able to speak up, a psychologically safe environment where people can say, I'm going to put my hand up and say, 1, I think there's a better way of doing something. 2, this is my idea that I think would have benefit to the business. Or 3, actually, I don't like the way that this is done, and I would like to bring this to the table to have a conversation about, so that we can affect some change there. So I think it's having a voice and autonomy that is very important. So,
Sheila, do you think that it's now an employees market? I'll use terms from the property market, buyer's market, seller's market. Do you think that the balance of power or strength has shifted a bit, and now people who are employed have more clout as opposed to the old hierarchical structures? Or is that just something that we felt during the pandemic?
I think that there is a shift in that relationship with employer and employee. And I think it's interesting, like the use of power, because I think in the past there's always been this hierarchical, I pay your wage, therefore I own you. And actually, it's not a balance of power. Is a really interesting word. And if we're looking at this balance of power, the employee has equally had in all of this time a similar level of power as the employer in some respects, because one doesn't function. We need each other. Without employees, we have no business. And the difference now is that with everything that's gone on this decade so far, and I can't believe we're only 2 years into this decade and so much is happening, work-life balance, working from home, COVID, absolutely, basically the pandemic forcing the world to pause and take thought has actually had a lot of people reflect on what actually is of value, what actually is important to me. So it's not always now those financial handcuffs, if you will, of the big salary. And we've got a different generation. So the generational differences, I always forget the different Gen X and all of this and which one's which, but, I'm of the older generation. I think I am the Gen X one. But all the millennials that are coming through, they have different needs. They live in a different world. They have different demands. So they have different priorities. And I think that if employers don't address this shift and this having to be a shift in power, a shift in needs or requirements, then they're going to face challenges about recruiting and retaining the right talent in their organisations.
Well, that is absolutely true. And we're working on that a lot at the Thoughtful Leader. There's something to be said for, as I say, everybody taking responsibility and being thoughtful for their own part in the drama, if we call it that. But what fascinates me is, health is at the root of everything. And I know that's why you have the word health in your brand. If we're not healthy, if we don't have our health, we don't have anything. And there's that expression, your health is your wealth. It's really, really interesting. We'll talk about the pandemic because, we're only a little way past it. And what I saw is a lot more people having had more time to reflect and not commuting as much, had a chance to think about and improve their health. Not everybody, But, is this going to be a permanent thing, or do we tend to swing back with that pendulum to the old way of doing things? And there are many people I know who are just as busy as they were before things slowed down. And I think they may get into those same bad habits. I don't know. What do you think? What have you seen?
I think there's a big mixture there. I think there are some people and some organisations that are absolutely, wow, this has fast forwarded us 10 years from, that's where we thought we were going to, and now we're here, and it's brilliant, and we can reduce our overhead, we can have less fixed costs with buildings and etc. And then there are other organisations, or even indeed other employees, that have gone, do you know what? That idea of working from home was good in as a thought, but actually when it comes to the reality of it, being at home on my own 5 days a week with no structure and no social environment is actually a challenge, and I find it really, really difficult to get through that. So I think that it's really individual for every business and every organisation, and then actually also for individuals. So I think this, kind of ripping up the rule book and throwing it out the window and saying, actually, what works for us? Forget what everybody else is doing. What works for us? What works for you? And really understanding people's motivation. Why do they want to work at home? Is that because they don't really want to work at home, but they're just scared? There's anxieties around going out on public transport, that type of thing. Because the pandemic introduced quite a lot of challenges for people around mental health. Where, somebody previously may never have struggled with anxiety, for example, but now the prospect of going out on public transport, having been closed in for so long, there's so many different levels of thought process going on across so many different people. I think this is where we really need to be as leaders and as employees, really thoughtful about what it is that we want and need from our employee and our employer experience.
And sometimes, to go back to my point, there simply won't be a synergistic approach, where there's a conflict of some kind. Maybe this has just brought to the fore the reality of making things work in the situation you're in, or changing. Like you say, people will leave if there's an environment that is consistently unhelpful to their health and their mental health. So, it's not an easy decision if people don't have any savings, for example, or they don't have any prospect of, going somewhere straight into another job. That can be tough. So many people end up staying and planning their escape or dreaming about their escape, but they don't get to do it. I'm going to switch tacks here and talk about you. You're in the hot seat, after all. And I'm going to ask you a question that I haven't asked my guests for a while. So, I thought, let me have some fun. No, I think it's fun for you as well. What is the most common misconception that people have about you, Sheila?
That's a really interesting question. I think it's a common misconception that people always make about lots of other people, is people often think I'm really confident and I've got it all together and I'm on that path and I know exactly where I'm going and what I'm doing. And some days I'm absolutely clueless. I am still figuring it out every day like everybody else. And I think people, because I'm quite a gregarious and outspoken character, people always think that I'm confident. I'm absolutely kind of got a life plan and I know what I'm doing.
Well, thank you for sharing that, because, we are getting to know you a bit. You're very, very articulate and confident sounding when it comes to the work. And, confidence, it's not binary. It's not either on or off. It isn't yes or no, black and white. So, there's a spectrum. And depending on what you're doing, if you're pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, anybody, I'm not just talking to you, of course, there's that, uncertainty. And if it's something you've never done before, why should you be 100% confident? So we've got to give ourselves credit for that. And I think, you setting up a business 3 years ago, what prompted you to do that? Because I imagine you were out of your comfort zone, or had you set up businesses before?
was hugely out of my comfort zone, absolutely massively. So I had, just as a brief, I'd spent most of my career working in supply chain. So I'd always been employed, always been a PAYE, pay as you earn employee. And I'd got to a good level of success within my field. I'd started life many, many years ago on a fruit and veg stall, selling vegetables and potatoes on Oldham Market. And I went on to a youth training scheme, like the equivalent of apprenticeship now, and literally worked my way up from being a young girl that was scared to answer the phone, and they had to send me on a confidence course for answering the telephone when I was like 16, 17, to working my way from answering the calls in the purchasing department to expediter buyer, senior buyer, etc., and all through those different roles. So when I got to a certain level of success, I was comfortable. I was confident in my comfort zone, and I went on, did other things, got to the heady heights of being a director and all the rest of it. And I hated what I was doing. I'd done it for 25 years, and I was so bored. But I had this fixed mindset, this lack of confidence, because I was and I was like, well, this is the life that's been cut out for me. And my business partner used to teach in schools, and she would teach the work of Dr. Carol Dweck on fixed mindset and growth mindset to students. And we would be jogging around by our house, or we'd go out on a run each day. And she'd be telling me, also, today we were talking about this with the students. And I was like, oh my God, I'm a fixed mindset person. That's shocking. And I was like, I don't want to be fixed mindset. I want to be growth mindset. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, but the good news is that means I don't have to stay in a job that I hate. I can do something different. And literally just that moment of enlightenment, if you will. And I just went, yeah, I'm going to do this thing differently. So I quit my job, set up my own business with my best friend and business partner, and said, we've got something here. We can really do something with that. And it was the most terrifying thing I've ever done. The most terrifying thing I've ever done. It was scary, stepped out of my comfort zone. I've had days when I've cried, where I've gone, what have I done? Should I run back and get a job? But I've pushed through it. I've pushed through it, and I push through it every single day, because there's doubts and insecurities every single day. But confidence comes from doing. And so I do every day. And then what felt uncomfortable at the beginning becomes regular and becomes part of who I am. And then I move on to the next thing, because being uncomfortable moves us forward.
I hear you. And I must admit, I haven't studied in depth about the fixed mindset versus growth mindset. Of course, I've read articles, and I'm just thinking now, thinking out loud, that some people might be very happy with their fixed mindset. Is that true? Or?
Absolutely. I was very happy with my fixed mindset. I was like, and I've got friends that I know have got more potential in them professionally, more potential in them personally to achieve stuff. And a lady that used to work for me many years ago, she was brilliant. And I was like, you should be the manager, and you should be this, and this. She's like, don't want it. I'm absolutely really happy where I am, and that's fine. The difference was I wasn't happy. And I wasn't happy, and I stayed in a place of unhappy because I was scared to get uncomfortable.
And that will affect someone's physical health and mental health, bringing it right around full circle. When you're happy, whatever you've chosen your life. Some people feel they haven't got choices. I believe decisions and choices we've made have led us to where we are. And when we acknowledge that, if we're not happy with where we are, absolutely, it will have an effect if we stay in that place, as opposed to taking steps, getting out of the comfort zone, and making a change of some kind. We really only have a couple of minutes left. I can't believe it. The time has flown. What would be your best piece of advice for people listening to us now on this topic, Sheila?
I would say don't be afraid of stepping out of your comfort zone, and don't be afraid of making mistakes, because the mistakes are how we learn, and I used to be terrified of failure, absolutely terrified of failure. And now I would just say fail fast, make as many mistakes as you can, because when you do that, that moves us forward. I've done everything wrong when it comes to leadership, when it comes to management. I've done it all wrong, but in doing it wrong, I've learned valuable lessons to take me forward that have really helped me develop and grow. So I would say fail and fail fast and make as many mistakes as you can because getting uncomfortable can really drive us forward.
And I wish you and all of our listeners and viewers continued good health, physical and mental and emotional and spiritual and all the other ones. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you. We have show notes, we have your bio, people can connect with you. And I hope they do, because this is a lot of sense that you're talking here. It is very topical, is very current. And thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and sharing this time with us, Sheila Lord.
You're welcome, Mindy. Thank you.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Thoughtful Leader, and I hope it's inspired you to be more thoughtful as a leader in your business. Please consider subscribing and leaving a review. An important question for you. Do you want to create a culture of thought leadership in your organization? My best-selling book, The Thoughtful Leader, is available now on Amazon and many other sites in paperback, ebook, and audiobook formats. Please visit www.mindygk.com for more great content. That's www.mindygk.com. Speak to you again soon.